So in this video, we're going to look at the Revolt of Owain Glyndŵr, the defining moment in Welsh history. Now, the Revolt of Owain Glyndŵr stands as one of the most significant chapters in Welsh history. It embodies the spirit of resistance and quest for a national identity. Spanning the early part of the medieval period, this uprising led by Owain Glyndŵr challenged the English authority and united disparate Welsh factions and ignited hope and independence. Glyndŵr's revolt reshaped the political landscape of the Wales and left an indelible mark on its collective memory. Now, Owain Glyndŵr was born around 1359 and into Welsh nobility. He was educated in England and held estates in northern Wales. Now, despite his allegiance to the English crown, he harboured quite deep-seated grievances against the English encroachment on Welsh lands and rights. There was a simmering discontent amongst the Welsh population, and coupled with Glyndŵr's leadership qualities and his charisma, it kind of set the stage for a rebellion that would challenge the status quo and inspire many generations of Welsh patriots. Now, the spark of the revolution by Owain was basically a series of events that included disputes over land ownership, the oppressive taxation system that created by the English, and various other perceived injustices inflicted upon the Welsh people by the English authorities. So in September, Glyndŵr proclaimed himself Prince of Wales and launched a coordinated uprising against English rule, rallying support from disaffected Welsh lords, clergy and commoners. His call for independence resonated deeply amongst the Welsh populace and ignited a fervent desire for liberation. Now, the revolt quickly gained momentum as Glyndŵr's forces scored quite a few decisive victories against the English armies, and they managed to capture a few key strongholds and expand their territorial control over Wales. Glyndŵr's military prowess and strategic acumen allowed him to outmaneuver some of the superior English forces, and he managed to inflict significant losses and consolidate his authority as the legitimate ruler of Wales. The rebellion reached its zenith when Glyndŵr convened a parliament at Macklin, I can't even pronounce it, I'll put it right, symbolising the resurgence of Welsh self-sovereignty and the establishment of a fledgling Welsh state. Now, despite these early successes, Glyndŵr's revolt faced some formidable challenges, including internal divisions amongst some of the Welsh factions, and obviously the relentless English counter-offences. Now, eventually the tide would turn against Glyndŵr, following a series of setbacks, which culminated in the capture of his family and erosion of support by his allies. Glyndŵr's forces had been driven into retreat, and the dream of Welsh independence was pretty much dashed. Now, while the revolt of Owain Glyndŵr ultimately ended up in defeat, his legacy endured as a symbol for Welsh defiance and resilience. Glyndŵr became a bit of a folk hero for his courage and commitment to the cause of Welsh liberation. Now, the Revolt of Owain represented a watershed moment in the Welsh history, in embodying the aspirations of a nation for freedom and self-determination. Now, despite its ultimate failure, Glyndŵr's rebellion inspired subsequent generations of Welsh patriots and fueled the ongoing struggle for Welsh identity and autonomy. In the annals of history, the legacy of Glyndŵr endures a testament to the enduring spirit of resistance and quest for justice in the overwhelming face of odds. So the rebellion instigated by Owain Glyndŵr lasted about 15 years, from about 1400 to about 1415. In 1415, one of the Welsh nobles announced that Owain Glyndŵr had died of natural causes. It is possible that he died in anywhere between sort of 1412 to 1415. they're not 100% sure whether he died, what year he actually died, because he kind of disappeared from public viewing around about 1412. Now, it's quite a good rebellion or conflict to cover as a medieval wargamer, because it's a turning point in Welsh history. It's the rebellion that could have kicked the English out of Wales. Now, whether they would have stayed out of Wales had Owain Glyndŵr and his force and his troops had succeeded, I mean, that's another question. I mean, my guess is even if they had succeeded and kicked the English out, the English would have regrouped and gone back in, and then we would have had another conflict within Wales to recapture Wales. I don't think the English would have stayed out permanently. I think they would have come back at some point, and maybe Wales would have enjoyed a period of independence before the English came back. But that is a possible what-if scenario campaign you could run with this conflict. There are plenty of plastic miniatures out there at the moment for medieval period. You've got some that have come out recently from Wargames Atlantic and from Victrix that cover slightly earlier period of medieval times, and it covers sort of like 12th, 13th century medieval knights. And then you've got the Perrys have got plastics that are roughly slightly later, the 100 Years' War and the War of the Roses period. And kind of, there will be miniature manufacturers out there that produce miniatures that'll cover this period, but they'll probably be metal. So if you're wanting plastics, you're probably going to have to do a bit of kit bashing. Now, by the 1400s, plate armour had started coming in. Only the richest knights, lords, would probably have worn predominantly plate armour at this point. A lot of it would have been a combination of chainmail and plate armour. So it is possible to kit bash between later period and earlier periods and sort of amalgamate something in the middle to fit. You can probably get away with using things like Dark Age Irish, with adding some more modern bits of kit equipment to them to become Welsh peasants. There are miniatures coming out, I believe, from Wargames Atlantic that are peasants or levy, and you should be able to use those. Some kit bash some of those with various weapons to be Welsh peasants. The medieval period is a good one for wargamers because it's quite chaotic and there are a lot of conflicts. In Britain alone, from 1066, you have the Norman invasion. And the Norman invasion didn't just stop at the Battle of Hastings. There were several years after in which the Norman forces under William had to subdue and control the rest of England. So you've got that chunk. Then in sort of in the 12th century, you had the anarchy, the conflict between Empress Matilda and Stephen, which ran for several years. And then you've got various periods in which there were uprisings and peasant revolts throughout Britain. You had the conflicts with Scotland and the English trying to take Scotland. You had the English taking Wales, the initial Welsh, and then the various skirmishes and uprisings within Wales prior to Owain Glyndŵr. You've got Owain Glyndŵr. You've got a Barons' War in the 13th century, which was a really chaotic period where the barons of England rose up which led to the things like the Magna Carta. Then you've got some really big peasant revolts in the medieval period, and then you've got various things like you have things like where the outlaws and banditry and stuff like that, where the stories and legends of like Robin Hood come from, and so and then you start going into later periods, and you've got the 100 Years' War, you've got War of the Roses, you start stepping out of Britain, and you've got various conflicts happening throughout of Europe, but you've also got the Crusades and in the Middle East as well. So the medieval period has a raft of conflicts and uprisings, rebellions, and various other bits and pieces in which to keep a wargamer busy for years. And consequently, from say 1066 right up to say, let's say 1500, some 1550s, you've got a period where obviously military equipment and weapons start changing, and then you've got the gunpowder starting to come in its very early forms of weaponry as you get later on into the medieval period, before you sort of descended sort of Renaissance and pike and shot. So you got quite a good several hundred years to wargaming, and it's not all the same. I mean, a lot of people assume it's just fairly similar. You know, medieval period is knights on horseback running around with swords and stuff like that, but it's not. You've got quite a bit of progression in military technology during those several hundred years, and the raft of conflicts and wars to actually sort of build a campaign around and to play out are enormous. I mean, just in Britain alone, it's quite a busy, chaotic period. And then once you start looking at the rest of Europe, and then looking at the Crusades in the Middle East, and you suddenly see that you as a wargamer just going into the medieval period, you could stick at that and nothing else. You wouldn't need to go out. That sort of say from 1000 right up to 500 year period where there's a significant change in military technology and the raft of conflicts and different sort of types of armies to play is enormous, and it's quite a fascinating period to cover. And you wouldn't need to step out of that period if you didn't want to. There's plenty there to keep you busy for the rest of your life. I mean, I'm looking at the medieval period at the moment with these videos, and I'm only scratching the surface of what's out there. I mean, this video only scratches the surface of what the rebellion under Owain Glyndŵr was. So this is yet another conflict to look at and delve deeper into and possibly play out as a campaign. I think it's quite an interesting one, especially if you're in Wales, because you got the opportunity to go and look at the ring of castles that were built by the English to try and subdue the Welsh. So you've got all that history to go out and look at, you know, take photographs and get some ideas, and especially for sieges and stuff like that. It's, you know, it's right on your doorstep, a whole raft of period of chaotic history to recreate on the battlefield, tabletop. Anyway, that's all I'm going to have to say on the subject this week. Don't forget to like and subscribe, and I shall see you next time. Cheers.